Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar organized. Oh, hi, Mia. I need to drop you off for now. I'm just doing the introduction, but that's fine. Don't worry. We'll see you later. Okay, in a minute. Okay. Sorry, that was Mia, one of our speakers who just joined in. So, hello, I'm Anne-France Kennedy. Welcome to this webinar organized by ClimateNet and our partner Nat5. This is a webinar about what is biodiversity and what are biodiversity credit for. I am Anne-France Kennedy. I'm the CEO and co-founder of ClimateNet, which is, in case you don't know about ClimateNet, it is a network, a global network of independent professionals who dedicate their time and effort to support projects around the world that remove carbon emission based on nature. So we support projects through the ClimateNet app, which is an app that you can download on the Google and Apple Store. You can join. It's like a WhatsApp if people are using WhatsApp. And you can then, on the app, support project, talk to project founders and help them with your expertise, your funding, your equipment, whatever they need. So feel free to download the app. It's available in 63 countries. It's free. But if it's not in your country, please let us know. And we'll make sure it's available in the next few weeks in your countries as well. We are an independent network. We are not associated with any specific organization or solutions. We just want to help projects all across the world to benefit from the expertise, knowledge, and help of each other. So I thank you for joining from all over the world. And oops, sorry, this shouldn't be this opening. Sorry, I don't know what's happening here. Sorry about that. So today we have a topic on for 90 minutes on biodiversity and what are carbon credits on biodiversity, with 4 of our members who are, contributing very hard to get the world know about how important it is to invest time, effort, money, and dedication to restore nature. So it'll be around the form of a panel discussion. Each of them will introduce themselves for a few minutes, and then I will ask them some questions. But also we will make sure that for 30 or 40 minutes, we have time for your questions as well. Feel free to write your comment in the public chat if there's anything you don't understand or you'd like to share, because also it's an opportunity for you to share with us what you think and your views. And in the chat, there's also a Q&A section where you can write your questions, and then our team will make sure that I'll pass them on to our speakers. So I'm going to welcome all of them one after the other. So Stefanie, Daniel, Álvaro, and Mia. Welcome, everyone. So we're going to unmute you, all of you. Thank you for being with us today. Mia. So I'm going to ask Stefanie, if you don't mind, to start first, introducing yourself in a few minutes. Is that all right? Yeah.
Hi, my name is Stefanie Kaiser. I'm very pleased that Daniel, Álvaro, and Anne-France have invited me to join this webinar. I'm by training a biologist, but for a very long time, I ignored biology and went into the forestry sector. So for 9 years, I was a communicator to the productive forestry and timber sector in the UK. And I loved it because I could get a real overview of the whole supply chain. What are the personal and business motivations for people? And also, why do people, actors in the supply chain, have very opposing views sometimes? That's something I really like as a person. And that's kind of my, let's say, land-based communications background. But then I was lucky enough, about 4 years ago, I went into the nature-based solutions sector. Precisely, I was working at the time for Nature Metrics and another biodiversity monitoring provider. It was very early days, and the product we were offering was solutions to detect animals at the project level. but people didn't really have a good understanding yet of what it meant to measure biodiversity. So my job for the first year was to really advise and help corporates, investors, but also project developers to understand not only how to measure biodiversity, but first, what is biodiversity? What does it mean? How does it fit into your strategy? And then what is the theory of change? Like, what are we trying to achieve and why? And it's been a very beautiful journey.
Sorry, Stefanie, do you mind coming a bit closer to the mic? Because your voice is fading a bit. I don't know if it's
And
just
I said that I got the chance to speak to project developers, rating agencies, dive really deep into the methodologies, geek out, connect with people. And then I also worked for a project developer. Now I'm an independent consultant and I keep observing this sector, and I'm really happy to contribute to this webinar today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's great. Daniel?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Sorry, 1 second. I'm very rude. Where are you based, Stefanie?
Edinburgh, Scotland.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Daniel,
Okay. So I'll start with that. I'm Daniel Sanchez. I'm based in Tijuana, Mexico. I started as a civil engineer. I studied that. Then I had a master's. And my whole approach to sustainability was, how do we change business models? How can we be more sustainable, but at the business, and much more on the strategy, but bringing it down to operations. So everyday operations for different businesses. And my path took me from circular economy to then nature-based solutions. And now being at Nat5, where I am the market maker, we see ourselves as an active player, not only as a standard that we certify biodiversity, water, soil, and carbon credits, but also that we actively promote and try to create a market, trying to bridging those gaps between the realities of everyday landowners, indigenous people, communities that want to preserve their forests, or just because they grew there, or out of commitment, and companies that want to be leaders and fulfill their commitment. It is something that is very I'm very alert to, and we are trying to, on a personal level and on a organizational level, that we're trying to understand. And biodiversity, how do we translate this very interesting and very much needed topic into a language that decision makers, ESG teams, corporates can understand, but also governments. It might get too technical and then we lose them, but at the same time, we need that rigor. We cannot lose sight of that. So bridging that gap, that's my approach. So happy to be here and to dive into this topic.
Thank you very much. Already exciting to see that from Scotland to Mexico, there is a concern and passion for biodiversity. Álvaro, where are you from? What are you doing here?
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for inviting me to this event. I am located in Colombia. I am Colombian, specifically in Medellin. I'm a forest engineer. I've worked for several decades in forest management and carbon credits, doing all the roles in the certification chain, from developing standards, methodologies, implementing projects in the field, and auditing also. So I know more or less all the certification chain. But some 3 years ago, I started working with biodiversity crediting. This is a very new area and very needed indeed. I currently advise NAT5 and also another standard based in Iceland, ICR, International Carbon Registry. And I also advise several companies on how to develop biodiversity credits, and especially how to deal with these uncertain and just nascent biodiversity crediting markets.
Thank you very much, Álvaro. Mia, welcome.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Mia. I'm CEO and co-founder of DD Master Carbon. DD Master Carbon is a carbon, climate, biodiversity, and sustainability startup. So on the biodiversity side, we basically supporting our customers all cycles, so from biodiversity dependency impact assessments and to biodiversity reporting, nature positive strategy, and we support them to purchase biodiversity credits through our marketplace. So we work with standards like Nat 5, but also other standards like Plan Vivo, Golden Standards, and so on. So we're based in France, Paris, and we have a subsidiary in Italy with mainly customers across Europe as well and in Asia. And as a background, so I am engineering by training and 10 years of experiences mainly in sustainability, strategy, and finance.
Thank you very much. So I think we're going to start with the first question that may be obvious to you all, but not obvious to most people is, what is biodiversity? What is your understanding of biodiversity and why does it matter? I think we're going to turn around Mia first.
Yes, so sure, I can start. So biodiversity for our side is the diversity in spaces and in ecosystem, in habitat. But on the corporate side, is what is your dependency and what's your link with the nature. So for most of our corporate customers, and they are either dependent on the biodiversity, either and it's because of regulations. Yeah, so it's what we understand from the biodiversity. So maybe other speakers have some other view.
So that's very interesting. That's why I think is really good that we have different perspectives. You come from the corporate business world and regulation. We're going to touch on it a bit later. So and Stefanie, what's your definition or understanding of what biodiversity is and why does it matter?
Thank you. Yeah, what Mia said just inspired me to say something different. It's very interesting. Many of you will have noticed that an issue or a barrier to getting this all off the grounds, the biodiversity markets, is the different understanding of concepts. And so we have the corporate world, the biologists, the communities, and I find it extremely exciting to bridge that. So when I was speaking to corporates and project developers, for me, first of all, biodiversity is very big, is like a lot of things. I have in my background, I'm featuring fungi, it's also biodiversity, it's plants, it's animals, but we also have to go wider, habitats. But obviously when we talk about credits, we have to somehow narrow it down and pick almost like a biodiversity ambassador that works for our cause, for our project. And we'll talk later about this. Is it then ecologically relevant or not? But this is a huge, huge topic. And what I found interesting is people talk about big and small biodiversity. So you can decide who is big and who is small. Usually people think of pumas, jaguars, and my other picture would have been a jaguar. So jaguars, elephants, they're iconic. So they emotionally resonate with people, which can also make it easier to sell, which is not a bad thing, right? And they're also quite relevant for rainforests. On the other hand, when you think about it from an ecological point of view, you really, especially also for restoration, you really want to look at all the little stuff like in size that is the foundation for life. So we have fungi, we have microbes, we have ants, because if they die, then that's really bad. So that is really interesting to look at the two things, and for different project types and purposes like agriculture versus rainforest conservation, you'll have to decide which one you focus on, and it'll be very different in terms of the methodology and the data you need for that.
Okay, so I have a big question later on. I'll make sure that Daniel and Álvaro, but it's a very good point. We need to drill down a bit more on that one, on the different types of biodiversity that you touched on. Daniel, what's your view?
Well, I think Stefanie mentioned it, the sort of the broader or the general description. But I think coming back to what Mia and because I'm also dealing with corporates, I will say is how do we translate biodiversity into something that people can relate and for good or for bad, that's what people relate to. Just iconic species, pretty photos of animals and plants, right? That's how we actually understand it from the human standpoint, and I think that is one of the biggest challenges. So, so not only is what is biodiversity, but how do we relate or how do we connect to biodiversity? And it comes from a very utilitarian standpoint or anthropocentric standpoint, but at the same time, that's why we're trying to protect it and conserve. And I'm getting philosophical here, but at the same time, how do we actually relate in our everydays with biodiversity and nature, and why that is important into protecting, conserving, or improving at a different or at any moment. So I'll stay in that for now.
Álvaro?
Yeah, well, most of people now lives in an urban environment, and most of the time inside big cities, and with each time weaker connection with nature. So something which should be obvious for everybody, what biodiversity means in practice, is not so clear right now, because for most people, biodiversity is just, as Stefanie said, some iconic species, some jungle very far away, but people don't see all the connections of life in our planet. And on the other end, biodiversity is inside us. So we are a colony of microbiota, and we are fully dependent of the life network. So it is so complicated to say why biodiversity is important, but it should be obvious for most of people, but unfortunately, it is not.
Thank you very much. John, there was the question already from John from South Africa. I'll make sure I answer your question. I'm just, want to just drill down on one little thought that I had about Stefanie. Do you know, is there a kind of a category of the different type of biodiversity somewhere that we can relate to? Is it like a list of, you're doing from is it like a big one word that is too big to encapsulate? So is there someone, I don't know, in the certification agencies or in anybody, like a list where we can share with our members, or is everybody has their own list? Like, what are the different categories of, or is there such a, or not?
I'm not sure if there's one list, but some standards like Plan Vivo would have buckets. Like they say you have to have one plant, one, I don't know what they have, different categories. But then here in Scotland, I've heard some people have a different approach where they call it big and small. Big is usually mammals, and small is basically almost everything else. Okay. But Álvaro maybe has a more standard definition.
Well, there are so many approaches for measuring biodiversity that you need to dig in every standard to see so different perspectives on how to classify and measure biodiversity. And this is one of the difficult issues, because I know that it is important to measure and assess biodiversity, but there is the danger of getting lost in the procedures and forget doing real action in the field. So we need to find a balance between measuring biodiversity and focus in specific biodiversity groups, but also put some efforts in real action in the field.
Okay. Does anybody has any burning thing that you haven't mentioned and you'd like to mention before we talk to we go to the next question? Is that all right for you so far? Yeah. And I'll answer the question in a minute. But the next question is, so why is it important to measure it, and why is it important that there's a market for it? Because I think that's what people really don't necessarily understand. Like, for example, I don't know, Mia, if you have a hard time no, Daniel first. Sorry, I meant.
Well, so I think we're at the culprit of I want to change my words. It's obvious that the impacts on climate change, and one of them is biodiversity loss. And again, it's linked to how we relate to nature and thus biodiversity as a component of it. So
sorry, Daniel, that's important. So there is a direct link, and you're all convinced, and I'm not debating it, but this is what is the link that a lot of people are missing. There's a direct link between the loss of biodiversity or protecting biodiversity and basically addressing climate change and the heat of the planet. So it's not an obvious thing for you, but I just want to make sure that for people it's not necessarily direct correlation.
No, and human well-being. And if you go just strictly from the corporate or from the business, whether you have a small mom and pop shop, or you have a big international corporation that whichever sector, manufacturing or car parts, whatever, you're dependent on nature, and whatever you get the sourcing from, the communities where that will be impacted are the communities that are more vulnerable, and at the same time that are more dependent. So it's a chain, and it's a pyramid if you want to see it like that. So if nature resources start getting depleted and we have more scarcity of water or food production, or if you have crops and you sell to a big corporation, or you do on your own, and your productivity or the crop, the yield is going lower year after year, then that is due to climate change a lot. And also the surrounding areas where your crop is, or your manufacturing plant, or where people who work at your manufacturing plant live, will be impacted due to those changes. So what we're trying to avoid, it's not conservation in a philanthropic or in an art way of just looking and enjoying nature without touching it. It's much more, how do we make the consequence of climate change less pervasive, and at the same time, how do we lift people who are actually protecting the forest, keeping those natural areas, because they have very little incentives from a market standpoint of doing it when they don't have income. And we all benefit from those ecosystemic or environmental services. So I think that is the challenge. How do people from far away in Colombia or Mexico or Brazil, just to mention hotspots of biodiversity, relate to their everyday operations in Scotland or in Europe or wherever they are, and how those are interconnected?
Thank you very much. Mia?
Yeah, I just want to intervene regarding like why it's important to measure biodiversity. So we can do the parallel with carbon because we measure a lot of carbon, and carbon is easy to measure because you only have one matrix, whereas biodiversity is extremely complex. However, if you don't measure it, you cannot improve it, right? So this is why the measurement is super important. For example, if a company, for example, our customers, we do biodiversity footprint for them. We also do biodiversity risk assessment for them. So, like concretely, and if you don't know like where biodiversity can impact you and where you can impact the nature, you cannot actually act on that. So this is why it's super important to measure it. And having a standard of measurements can also align your different type of operations. So, for example, currently we're working with the customers. They are a Middle East company and super big, with a lot of hotels across the world. and having same methodology for their different operations is super helpful to first classify which is the most prioritized sites to work on, and then they can to adapt different type of actions. So yeah, so everything starts with measurement, and what is sad is today everything needs to have a price. Everything is linked to financial metrics. So if you cannot give a price to biodiversity, people will think that it's free, and nobody will act on that.
So we're going to definitely we have more time for the topic about the market and the actually biodiversity credits. We'll get into that in a minute. So thank you. That's the link. We're going to come back. Stefanie, and would you have anything to say about why measuring it? Why is it important? Why we need to monetize it one way or the other?
Yeah, and I'll then leave for Álvaro the question of the difference between carbon credits and biodiversity credits. Yeah, so touching on what Daniel and Mia said. So first of all, I'll start with the corporate side. From the corporate side, if we want to be really sober about it, it's about risk management. Some of them have great missions, but if we think about nature and biodiversity, biodiversity is an ecosystem service. So it's, we all rely on this, and if we lose biodiversity in nature, everyone dies and there's no business. So it is in everyone's interest. But it's a bit of a tragedy of the commons. If we don't have a system in place where people pay something to preserve it, nobody's going to do anything about protecting or restoring nature. So I think from their side, it is a positive signal in the right direction that we are looking for market-based mechanisms, because then they find the right structure to buy an actual product. Okay. Yes, we will talk about the complexities of doing that, but otherwise they just wouldn't have meaningful ways to invest in nature other than through foundations, and nature needed just more funding. From the supply side, again, we cannot just rely on NGO funding, because obviously we're seeing that the crisis of nature destruction at the higher level is just so fast that we needed to find these new structures. Now, measuring it in forestry, they always say what doesn't get measured doesn't get managed. And if we want to squeeze something as complex as nature into a unit that we can sell, we have to look at nature accounting. Like, first, what do we have? Like, have our baseline, how has it changed? And this is then the complexities we're dealing with right now. And Álvaro will talk a bit more about this. That it's not easy to measure. And then we go back to what is biodiversity, what are the assumptions that we use to measure it. But it is really the basis of any product that we sell on the market. And yeah, Álvaro, over to you to explain more.
No, I think you did it great. I have not too much to add. Just that failing to put a price in nature values makes it invisible to the rest of society. It's a matter of having the biodiversity visible to economists, to decision makers, to politicians. So the best way we have found in our society to give relevance to these issues is setting a price to what we want to have relevance. So that's why we need to put a price on biodiversity. It is priceless, I know. And if we are naturalists, we know that it's difficult to assign a price, but otherwise it is not included in our decisions as a society.
Okay, so thank you very, very much for that. So then the next question, and answer everybody's question. I just want to make sure us as speakers and the audience we're on the same page on like key elements of the discussion before we go into all the questions. So what defines a biodiversity credit? I mean, without going into too much technicalities, but what I'm hearing is that we need to create a one kind of price for one type of community, however you call it, whether it's a big, small animals, or that the market will understand and will value and invest in to save their business or us on the planet, whoever's motivation it is. So who created the notion? What's your understanding of what is a credit, a biodiversity credit, Stefanie?
Oh, I thought that you would ask Daniel first. The understanding of a credit in general for me, and I hope I'm not saying the wrong thing in front
There's
of
nothing, nobody's right or wrong. It's just different perspectives.
I think for me, it's a unit is like a certain amount that can differ from methodology to methodology of either net gain, net improvement of biodiversity per area. Right. And then some of them will obviously have a weighting to that, depending on like which type of biodiversity is more important in terms of how threatened they are or significance. And I think the differences here are the sort of amount of gain, I think also kind of maybe the area. And it's very different, I think, for conservation and restoration. We found that it is the tricky bit is for conservation. I found I'd like to hear Daniel's and Álvaro's view on that. We did actually go to the Amazon to do sampling, water sampling, because a client wanted to develop a methodology, and I just could not see how they were going to do that. I think it's I would love to know how they do that. On the other hand, for restoration, again, it depends a lot on the starting point. Are you starting from nothing or not? To distinguish what is natural versus what is change that you can attribute to the action of someone, and that has implications. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I just think we need to have different approaches for different situations, rather than just one type of unit that is a catch-all.
So what I understand, going back to the importance of measuring it, what I'm trying to understand is we need a baseline.
Yes.
Right? Everybody needs a baseline. That's why you need to measure something, like what is it before you start any intervention, whether it's restoration or conservation. Is that right? So
it's like when you go to the gym and they do a baseline and like how fit you are, and then they measure it again.
Yes, exactly. That's a very good analogy. Yeah. Sorry, Daniel, what's your understanding what a credit is?
So a credit is a unitization, so we can simplify. And the corporations or the organizations that are creating impacts, and so we can have a unit that's tradable, right? Putting a price or setting a price. Obviously, we use 100 square meters as a base, but then it's factored, as Stefanie mentioned. But I would say, just to keep it very short, that's how we establish, because other than that, then we have to start talking about the methodology, or how do we get into those numbers, right?
Not yet.
But so what I want to say is that what we believe is that biodiversity is not something that's static, it's dynamic, and at the same time, it's going to change over time. And Edward Deming said, you can improve what you can measure, right? So everybody needs a starting point. Yes, with that. But I think what we see is that we have adapted the methodologies to the realities of what already is, as opposed to an ideal. And I'll let Álvaro go a little bit over more on that.
Okay, I will put a very simple equation in the chat. Mm-hmm. And it is fully compatible with what you were saying, both Stefanie and Daniel. Biodiversity, and this definition comes from the Biodiversity Credit Alliance, so it's more or less as a consensus between the people related to biodiversity credit markets. Biodiversity credit is a specific result or activity done in a specific area during a period of time. That's at the highest level how we can define a biodiversity unit. And this looks quite simple. But the issue here is, the most difficult issue here is how to measure results or activities. There are many standards that are activity-based. I mean, they pay you based on the cost and the type of activities you are doing, besides the results from those actions. And other standards don't care about the activities done, but on the results. And how you measure the results in a homogeneous way, based on what indicators and based on what metrics, is the difficult part of this definition. And then regarding area and time, they are easier to measure. But the difficult part is that each standard takes a different decision. So some standards measure in months, others in years. Some standards measure 1 square meter, and I'm talking about real examples. 1 square meter, others 10 square meters, 100 meters, 1 hectare. And then the time could go from 1 month up to 100 years. So although the definition itself is compatible with every standard, it is difficult to homogenize the biodiversity unit because these decisions regarding these 3 pillars of the metrics.
Thank you very much, Álvaro. That was really, really helpful. And I don't want to dive right now in the different standards, but what I'm hearing, and tell me if I'm wrong, is there is no international agreed definition. It's not a regulatory mandatory market. It's a completely new market that all the players like you today and quite a lot of players are trying to promote, to get funding, to get more projects on the ground to restore and conserve nature and biodiversity. But it's for the moment it's a bit like a finger in the air. Everybody's trying their best, but everybody, it's new to everyone. So if you have a corporation like whatever corporation and they're selling toothpaste or they're selling cocoa like chocolate and they're being told, oh, you need to preserve biodiversity, it's not there. They know nothing about it. So they need people like you guys, but also a sector and industry that gets together, hence all these alliances. But it's important to understand that it's for the moment it's not. There's no. Tell me if I'm wrong. Maybe Colombia, I don't know, has actually made biodiversity credit a mandatory commitment for companies to invest in. Is there any of this scheme existing or not already? Is there?
Yeah, well, the biodiversity credit market indeed started as an offset market some 50 years ago, if I'm not wrong, in the United States. But the trends now are completely different because one thing is offsetting damages to biodiversity and another thing is doing voluntary contributions to biodiversity. So those regulatory frameworks are focused on offsetting some damages because doing a road or a dam, something like that. But most of the biodiversity credit market is outside this regulatory offsetting scenario and goes into the pure voluntary contributions. So that's the current situation.
I think
Álvaro
and myself.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Stefanie. I'll just let Mia say something because I don't know if she answered the question, and then Stefanie, of course. Sorry.
Yeah, so I just want to add also something that we observe in France and in Europe in general, as we are all like in different markets. So yes, and Álvaro, Stefanie, Daniel, you're absolutely right. So today there's no standard units, and however, like some big standards are trying to have, and everyone have their own units, right? So like gold standards is a label CCP with a carbon credits. And so actually the units is a ton of CO2 with biodiversity co-benefits. Like for example, in France, recently there's new type of biodiversity credits that is proposed by the government. So currently it's still voluntary, but in some moment they're going to be compliant. And this is how much areas that we are going to conserve into period. So which is exactly the equation that you have displayed. So so yeah, so my point is, and actually there's no unified standards and units and across countries and markets. But the one that you gave is it's quite good. Yeah.
Sorry, Stefanie, you want to say something?
I just wanted to add something to what Álvaro said about the compliance markets, because I think both Colombia and the UK, where we're based, have these approaches. And I think at least it is definitely a signal in the right direction. It also will kind of pull the voluntary market with it. I'm not sure if in Colombia you have something where you have the country divided in eco-regions, and then you have to kind of offset in a similar area. In the UK, it's quite narrow because there is one type of sector. I think it's mainly the infrastructure sector that they have to then prove that they have a 10% uplift. And I think that's great. I think also in Australia and New Zealand, but I think in general also in the voluntary market, we will need these very specific approaches, maybe for certain situations, like stratifying the market. And then I think within those, it will be easier to standardize. And I think that's happening already a little bit. We're later going to talk about different standards with different flavors. And yeah, I think that's the way forward.
Thank you very much. Okay, unless anybody has any burning new points to make.
Well, I would just like to add that although, and maybe I'm getting ahead, but I'll just say very quickly that although it's different, the impacts that are happening in one region to another, right? It's just a way of comparing or one with the other. And that's something that as a standard, and in this case, NAT 5, that's why we have the units. So it can be understandable for different regions, but obviously, and this is the part that the market is, you want to do the positive impacts or the compensations in the areas or the basins or the watersheds where you are creating those impacts. But I'll wait that for later.
Okay, so I hope we all can. Oh, sorry, Álvaro, you go.
Yeah, just one more reflection on this. Offsetting is a huge temptation, I could say, for biodiversity, because offsetting created these compliance carbon markets and made a real market, big indeed market. And it can also help biodiversity, but the complexity is very big because it's not as simple as offsetting molecules of greenhouse gases, but offsetting real life, offsetting at what level, what is the ecosystem equivalence, and what are the interrelations between species, habitats, and ecosystems. So it's needed, it's important, but they should be developed as different paths, pointing in the same direction of preserving and restoring biodiversity, but having very clear differences between these two roads, let's say, these two paths.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we're going to go closer to the end, but potentially of the risk and challenges of this type of market, and also learning from the controversy around the carbon market, and maybe learning from that and avoid that. But I think I'm going to go through question, unless you mind, because I feel that the audience, take the time to then. So first with John, and I think we have enough ground baseline ourselves on the talk to answer. How can I measure the increase in the number of in the number and diversity of soil microorganisms? So rigorously, quickly, and semi-automatically. So who would like to take this question? It's in the chat. If my English is not that bad, you can see it in the Q&A. It's easier for me to potentially to look at it. So anybody who wants to help?
Not
John?
Me.
Okay, I'll go unless one of the NAT 5 wants to go.
Go ahead, Stefanie.
Yes, it's a difficult topic. So I used to work for an eDNA provider, and this is one option. It's
what? Sorry, can you
an environmental DNA
sorry.
is an option.
Okay.
It's not cheap, but how it works is you would take soil samples. The trick here is in where do you take the soil samples? If you have a very even ground, let's say something where the soil is more or less the same, let's say somewhere in Europe, an agricultural field, it's fairly cheap and doable. If you have a lot of variety, you have to take a lot of samples because the soil will change depending on what grows and depending on the root structure. But regardless of that, you would take soil samples and then they're sent to a lab, and then the genetic they use a primer that looks at the genetic differences between different species. So they have primers that go for bacteria, others for soil fungi, and others for soil invertebrates, such as earthworms, for example. And all of these are important for the structure and the quality of the soil. Right. So what they then do is they give you first a number of different species that you have per group of organisms. And now they're doing a bit more, and they're also looking at which of these cover the different functions. So it's a bit similar to these apps that you get now that look at the gut microbiome. So it's difficult to find correlations directly, but empirically, the more data we collect, we get like signatures. So we can say these examples, we have seen that in healthy soils in Colombian tropical forest in this area, the signature looks like this. It's like a dots on a plot. So we're now collecting more data, and that's one thing. I've then also seen a company in Brazil, they were using a proxy, and I think they were doing a chemical analysis that had to do with something that certain bacteria produce. And that's a proxy, but it is doable, but over very large areas with a lot of variability, it is complex just because of the variability.
Thank you very much. Anybody else?
I will only add that there's and this is just an option. There are some sensors that allow you, some acoustic sensors that allow you to estimate the biodiversity, the microorganism biodiversity with those acoustic sensors. That could be a semi-automatic way to do so. That's for the first part. But the other is who will pay for such increasing biodiversity. But then again, I'm guessing you're not only you're asking about soil, but that's not the only element in the project, right? There must be other elements. So who will pay for such increases in biodiversity? Then I would say that depends on the project, but again, it's coming to the markets and where it's located, who's impacting, and so if you, I don't know, I'll give you an example. If you are grazing there and you're selling the meat, so the most direct link is for that company that is purchasing that meat to obviously do the impact or pay for that increase in biodiversity. That would be the most natural link. Who's ever having or creating those impacts, doing those negative impacts, becoming or turn them into positive. But again, we would need a baseline, as Mia mentioned, and start from there.
Okay, so what you're saying is the company or the business that is linked to either biodiversity loss or is suffering from it will be incentivized by the market or by the pressure of the stakeholders to actually invest.
Definitely.
Okay, so
where it makes more sense.
Okay, Álvaro, you have any view on that question on soil microorganism, and Mia?
Yeah, I can just add who will pay for that. So I would say mostly companies, so either they do that in a voluntary way or like in a compliance way. So there's several compliance regulations in Europe and UK. and that they need to act on that, so they will pay for that. But also, for example, on the Middle East or Asia, there's no compliance, so it's more for reputation, branding, and also value driven, that they will pay for biodiversity net gain.
Okay, thank you very much. So now the question from McKenna. How often in your work are organizations looking to enter the biodiversity market for regulatory reasons? And obviously not in the USA, perhaps in Europe or Latin America. Maybe clients are taking this action to maintain good standing in regulation. But I guess we touched a bit on that with France and Colombia, but maybe you want to dive a bit more. What's the trend, and is there a trend?
Yeah, I can maybe start.
Yeah,
because we're just completely doing that. Yes, so definitely. So the compliance reporting. So there's several compliance reporting in Europe in general, and also those companies who have their subsidiary in Europe, and so like EUDR, which is no deforestation law. We also have the CRZE4. Yeah, so all this compliance and biodiversity law oblige companies, and in this case they will enter into the biodiversity market. So very recently we have a very big furniture company, so they sell furniture in Europe markets, and they import wood from other countries, and they don't care at all about biodiversity. And before that, and because of EUDR, which is entering in January 2026, so they don't have any choices, and they're going to work on biodiversity. And same for another very big agriculture company, and on the CSRD4, so they need to do that. So now they are working on biodiversity markets, which is not the case in the past. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Álvaro, do you have a view on McKenna's question about the pressure on regulation? Or
Well, my experience is most in the pure voluntary biodiversity markets. I know there are some regulations in place here in Colombia that there are some good opportunities, and one standard sizing this opportunity in the compliance market. But I see most of the people is moving into the biodiversity market because they see a commercial opportunity for funding specific activities in the field.
Okay, so you're saying, are we saying that the voluntary market is a bit more dynamic and more ready than the regulatory one?
It's difficult. It's very difficult because what made the carbon markets dynamic was all these negotiations of putting caps of greenhouse gases emissions and doing compliance regulations. But I don't know how this will evolve. I just know that we are living a biodiversity crisis. This will, either we like or not, this will appear in everyday's life of everybody. So sooner or later, we will see that this is an urgent issue to solve. Maybe when we finish thinking on economic crisis and wars, we will start thinking on biodiversity, and then it will boost the biodiversity credit market. I don't know.
Okay, but what we're saying is, for now, there's a huge pressure from more the, let's say, climate change pressure and businesses than regulatory necessarily, and that's what I'm understanding. Unless, Daniel?
So I'd say I would like to add that on the voluntary side, what we've seen in talking about the market is if you are outside the regulatory or compliance aspect, whether it's the EU regulation on the deforestation, what is the biggest incentive is reputation. Being accused or finger pointed of greenwashing, and on the other side is companies that are committed. So that's typically more on SMEs companies, which the decision-making process is shorter, leaner, as opposed to big corporations, because we're a good reflection of that. there's a learning curve. How many corporates have a biodiversity expert within their teams that is already talking with the CFO, or do they have a strategy, or do they have a budget allocated for that? So that is something that tells us the level of maturity that corporates have for making a robust change or shift in their procedures or whatever. But how they are linking it, or how they are tackling it, is their operations. They do see it. And so businesses that are in the primary sector, agri, tourism, that are much more linked in their value chains to nature, have a bigger incentive, because if you have crops and your production or your productivity or your yield is lowering, then you're looking for solutions. And then you listen, or you hear that nature-based solutions are a long-term solution that can help you decrease or mitigate the impact of climate change. So that's how you approach it. Like, you want to keep productivity at level, growing, whatever, right? That's how you approach it. On the
So what you're saying is, yeah. Sorry.
That's for corporates. Sorry, and on SMEs is more on the leadership, commitment, striving to be congruent. That's what I would see. What we see in the market. And so that's the learning curve. We actually frame it in 3 barriers, but I can speak to that later.
Stefanie?
Yeah, I just wanted to put this in a bit of a bigger perspective, what the other speakers have said. So if we think of what we all know a bit better, which is carbon, we had, let's call it net zero, okay? So the companies, they have net zero targets, net zero strategies. They account now for their emissions within supply chain, scope 1, 2, 3. And then the voluntary credits, they're usually for compensating, or for not necessarily only offsetting, but for either a nice to have, or because they couldn't reduce all of their emissions. So with nature, we could see this in a similar way. When we have been talking here about biodiversity credits, we're not talking necessarily as like a regulatory thing within supply chain. It's still something that companies would do as part of those new nature positive strategies, which is an extension of carbon strategies. So these systems that Mia, frameworks that Mia mentioned, CSDR, TNFD, they are an extension of what was net zero. It just now increasingly includes nature in the wider sense, biodiversity, water, soil. So the credits, they're a bit still reputational management, and I think we still need a place to find a place for them, like in those frameworks. But the question that McKenna asked is interesting, because as part of nature reporting, some companies have to report on nature, I think through CSDR. Then the task force for nature-related financial disclosure is voluntary, but it will increasingly be part of national regulations. Investors are looking for it. So there's a market pressure there as well. So they are also measuring their impact on nature. They are their dependencies, but not to create a tradable unit, but for something else. So I'm currently working for PFC, for example, as a consultant, and the timber sector as well is looking at how can we measure better our impact on biodiversity, on water, on soil, and then what does that mean for the end product? Like, how do we get a premium for that? FSC is doing the same. The agri sector will be doing it as well, because it's additional measurements, and we have to somehow find out, if it's not through a biodiversity credit, how do we get that return on measuring investment back somehow? So people are talking about premium timber, premium, maybe it's something like organic. We have an organic label, we could have a biodiversity plus label. So I think these are like alternative routes that are not credits, that are like a product that is independent of the corporate.
Thank you very much to make the link. That's really important. Thank you. Thank you, Stefanie. Daniel?
I would say that one of the biggest challenges with carbon markets and the markets in general is that the labels and the amount of intermediaries ends up costing too much, And that is also a big barrier, a big challenge for smaller project developers, local communities that own the land, that can pay certification fees that are too expensive. And on top of that, verifications, validations, labels, which there's so much on the integrity of the projects, but what about the demand side? So I think one of the challenges that we look to address is we lower those barriers, those entry barriers, and that is the business model that we have as Nat5, is that we get 20% of the credits, but that's the formula we've achieved. So projects can get certified. But then again, the demand for projects with very high integrity, which we believe we're certain that we have it, but then all those other elements, and we were talking before the webinar, Stefanie, the amount of intermediaries, it just makes it inaccessible for most of the people, where nature is still what's the word? Natural areas that we still have. So that's de-incentivizes doing projects. And then how do we, because there's another big market force, zoning, land use change, that tourism or urban development or others, or the lack of opportunities for people who live in those communities. So I think that I just wanted to raise that element of the market challenge.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'd like to. Sorry.
I just want to intervene, like regarding the part of intermediary, because we also, as a marketplace, we are kind of intermediaries. And however, like what we observe of the market is, and somebody they're trying to enter into a very early stage of different projects. So we have recently worked with a buyer, and so we are not talking about offsetting. We're more talking about insetting, and they go to very early in the project. And I would say even before the feasibility part. So you have the land, for them, for regenerative agriculture, you have the land, you have some technical profitability, and they can enter into the market. And I think in setting, it should be a word like in biodiversity in setting can also be a way much easier to finance very early stage biodiversity projects. So maybe also think about this kind of mechanisms of the markets.
So yeah, we're going to definitely touch for hopefully 10 minutes on the challenge and opportunity of the market, on the biodiversity credit market, and also the link to the challenges and I would say that learned from the carbon market that you just articulated, Daniel. But I think we need to go to questions, but and if that's okay, but we're going to go back to that question because it's a really important question as well. So a question from Daniel. I have another Daniel. What is your perspective on the application of biodiversity credit on regeneration projects in the agricultural landscape, where the land is still productive under regenerative principles? So I think the idea here, I don't know if you understand the question, is how you actually make the most of both worlds. You have a productive landscape that produces crops and, in a regenerative way. And I guess, would it help them to be, more, I guess, get more revenues or be more developed, however you understand the question. Who would like to take that one? Okay, great. Álvaro, go for it.
Yeah, well, I think there is room for improving biodiversity everywhere, from urban biodiversity to agricultural landscapes, genetic conservation, everywhere. So we need the actions everywhere to restore, in this case, biodiversity and also conserve biodiversity. So I always like to see that all the actions can be rewarded, possibly as credits or in another way, but we need ways to help in all types of ecosystems and productive activities. In talking specifically about regenerative agriculture or improving biodiversity in agriculture, there are a few standards that address these specific activities in the field, so they can be also part of the biodiversity credit markets.
Anybody else would like to answer this question?
Yes, just very briefly, we do have in the standard, the NAT5 methodology, we do consider this type of project. So we believe it's like Álvaro said, and again, we work with water, soil, biodiversity, and carbon. Again, we need to create incentives and reward people who are doing the projects or who want to do the projects. We need to incentivize them so they are able to monetize their efforts and thus keep doing it.
So I'll give you a very good example. And so I just thank you, Daniel, for the question. So we have one of our members who has a farm in South Africa. We did a webinar with him 1.5 years ago. And his challenge is he's committed to nature and biodiversity and everything, but he doesn't have a lot of yield because he's using a lot of regenerative solutions and no chemicals. But the farmers next to him, their yield is so much better and they sell so much cheaper. So he came to us, and I guess 18 months ago, we didn't really hear about biodiversity credit. So maybe you can help him. It's called Garen Reynolds. He's in the app. So, do contact Garen and say, we can help you potentially to monetize what you're doing and get. So it's not that he wants to become rich. It's not the point. He wants to be able to sell his product to the market at the same price as the others. And because, in some market, people wouldn't appreciate that it's better product, at some point price is key. Yes, Stefanie.
No, that is a huge challenge, and that's the same that we're currently seeing with timber as well, is like, and even with using biodiversity assessments and creating active biodiversity impacts as an add-on to carbon credits, which you can do, for example, using the traditional VERA with the community climate and biodiversity standard. So what we see always is it's a lot of work, it's money, it's patience, and then you don't see an uplift in the price that is directly correlated to what you put in. And that's the thing that needs to change. So I am not 100% sure if I understand how we could create biodiversity credits for all of these situations. And I don't think we have to. Like thinking about farming, yes, you can clearly measure the difference in biodiversity between one with and one without regenerative agriculture, but it's not going to be linear and increasing all the time, So there's a lot of things. But what I do see is if we go to the supermarket, a product that we buy, the price that we pay, a very small price usually is the product. The rest is brand recognition. It can be a story. So here in Scotland, sometimes I buy cans of craft beer, and they're like, first they were double the price and then 3 times the price. And I know it, but they have really nice designs of local artists, and they tell the story of the local brewery that's made it. And I know that's what I'm paying for because it makes me feel good. So and then we have organic, we have fair trade, where we pay a little bit more for that. So I think we could have something similar for other types of nature impact, because organic, or maybe we need to evolve the organic into something bigger. I think we need to find the right pathway of getting, like, baking it into the final product. And then when we think about fashion and stuff, I mean, there's lots of challenges we have with lots of products where we don't pay the real price. But
okay, I think we're going to have to jump. Sorry, unless anybody want to keep going on the Nina Nabiha question, which is very, very interesting. So that's why we're having these forums. She's basically challenging you a bit on your definition, all of you, of biodiversity. That it's if I understand the question or the point, is that we have to link it to health. and everybody's helping, as you said, Álvaro, to human beings. But if there's, maybe I understand the question is, if there's too many humans that, you know, live on somewhere, how do you tie it up with biodiversity? So, and also she's mentioning there's different buckets for her. There is conservation, sustainable use and livelihood in working landscapes, and restoration, mitigation of lost damaged ecosystems. So I'm not sure, I don't know if you understand her point, or if someone wants to pick it up. I guess it's not easy always for people to articulate in a chat. I don't know if Nina is still here, but if anybody has any comment on that question or suggestion.
I think what she might be saying is that we haven't really addressed the human element that much, and that ecosystem services are services for people. Well, they're human-centric, but I'm not sure the question specifically.
So I guess the vision is there's conservation, sustainable use, and restoration. I think you did touch a little bit of it on Stefanie before, but there's different. I think there's different ways of working on biodiversity. That's, I think, what maybe she wanted, and the link to human. And maybe just one quickly on that one, because I think, Daniel, you have a lot of experience. I think there's a lot within ClimateNet. There's a lot of tension, not tension, but there's a lot of question about the tension between human and like human beings living and abusing nature, basically. So typically mangrove, or tree cutting. Or I've been to Djibouti, where all the animals are eating, camels and goats are eating all the acacia trees. So how do you work out the tension between human and nature?
I would like to frame this a little bit that we also have to understand that personal impacts on nature are way lower as opposed to corporate impacts. It's like sort of the fossil fuel industry, right? Their footprint on the carbon is radically, exponentially different to individual humans. So and talking about so that's one thing, and the other is, and this is to better understand the question. Maybe you guys have a better idea. Most people live in urban settings now, right, as opposed to 50 or 60 years ago. So I think that also changed the relationship we have with nature. And there's a movement to go back to nature, or to reconnect with nature as something that we've lost. But I believe that the biggest challenge is not only nature to be appreciated or be enjoyed, but also something that we need to protect, preserve, conserve, so our livelihoods and our qualities of lives are improved. And at the same time, it's a different way of humans relating with nature. I don't know if I am touching or addressing the actual question. If she's around, maybe she can give us more explanation, or you have more idea.
Álvaro?
Yeah, I just want to add that from a perspective of reviewing all the existing biodiversity creating schemes, most of them have safeguards regarding the importance of local communities, of including them not only as actors in the landscape, but active actors in designing and implementing the projects. Some standards have indeed specific rules for including them in the monitoring systems, so that it is also participative. So Nina is right. There are many aspects of the biodiversity creating work that are difficult to address in just this event. But yeah, people is an important part of the biodiversity credits landscape, for sure.
Thank you very much.
I just want to complement and would say, and Ariel, which is very right. And so like, and when we talk about biodiversity, and I mean, Daniel, you know much better than me as you're a standard. So yeah, and the biodiversity, and even if you have this type of unit, like the enough area that is protected or whatever, and there's also all the what we call co-benefits. And so okay, I'm going to take VCS. So their units ton of CO2 with CCB labels. So they take account carbon, people, and biodiversity. Whereas all the labels, and so French label is biodiversity first, but they take account other benefits, water, pollution, as well social parts. So yeah, so even if the standards or the units is correlated to the biodiversity, there's always a co-benefits. So if it is something that is nature positive, it would be also positive in a more global way. So you cannot, and I think there's also some problem that we can have with carbon credits is carbon credits. There's certain type of credits that is super on the sequestration level or avoidance level, however, that can damage the nature or all the environmental impacts. And I would say like unlike to buy these credits, they take more accounts into a global way, because bodies itself is a multi-dimensional matrix compared to carbon. Yeah. So yes, definitely. And when we talk about bodies, we are not only talking about bodies itself, but also everything around.
Okay, good. Thank you very much for this clarification. Stefanie or anybody else wanted to? Thank you for your comments, Stefanie. It's very helpful in the chat. So, okay, another question from Nina. I guess she moved on from biodiversity definition. So the question is, how do you all see the compliance markets, like historical mitigation banking in the US, UK, and Australia, meshing with the new voluntary biodiversity credit market? And do you see the voluntary biodiversity credit market complementing or replacing the carbon credit in nature phase, which I think is a follow-on of just what you just said, Mia, in a way?
Yeah, so I can start, and maybe
yeah, sure.
Analysts can complete. So yes, so okay, so because we are working both on carbon and the biodiversity credits, so we have this clear view. And so carbon credits, you have different types. You have nature, you have removal, avoidance, industrial credits. So most of carbon credits of nature, they can add a label as a with carbon benefits of biodiversity or not. So definitely on the carbon market, biodiversity credit is replacing carbon credits, nature carbon credits without biodiversity carbon benefits. So yes, however, there's those credits that have no benefit with biodiversity. So currently there's a lot of industrial, they use it. So energy, I don't know, like manufacturing of this type. So like CCUS, I don't know if you're carbon capture, utilization, this type of credits, they're not replacing that because this industrial, they will use this type of technologies on their own value chain. So it's not same than the nature and credits. So if I answer the question, so yes, nature credits are replacing carbon. I would say, yeah, nature credits are replacing carbon credits, and those come from nature part, but without carbon benefits and biodiversity. However, they're not replacing industrial credits. So first question, and the second is regarding the reporting part and the compliance parts market. So what I see is on the banking side, so we also work with financial institutions. There's two new reporting that is coming and in there. So first, the two that already exist is taxonomy SFDR, and there's a new one which is what we call EBA, which is related to ESG risk, and obviously you have biodiversity risk. So in this case, and there's more and more banking and financial institutions, they started to talk about biodiversity itself because of regulations. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. and if anyone else wants to follow.
I wanted to follow up on what Mia said. So Mia was saying that biodiversity credits biodiversity credits can replace the nature-based solutions carbon credits. I'm not sure if they will replace them. I would say complement or replace, to be seen. I want to give an example. So first of all, carbon credits, as Mia said, we have tech-based carbon credits from renewable energies, carbon capture, and the type we are talking about are nature-based solutions credits, which is usually about land or marine conservation or restoration. So if we take, for example, a rainforest in Brazil, to make it really easy to understand, then if, let's imagine we have right now a very good methodology for biodiversity credits for this ecosystem, and that also works for communities. So in this case, we would actually have two market options. We could either say, okay, we're going to use the pathway of carbon credits, which nowadays will also come with very strong biodiversity and social requirements, because the demands of the markets, you will not do it otherwise. Or you could go down the route of a biodiversity credit, because the Amazon will have loads of biodiversity to conserve. So what you want to do is you want money to protect the rainforest. Now you can choose how you sell that natural capital. So sometimes you might have a forest where you don't have a good use case for carbon because of the additionality, which means if the bulldozers aren't close to your forest and it's not under immediate threat, you might have a problem getting a good carbon potential. So now with biodiversity credits, ideally you want to have it in a complementary way. So the guy who from Replanet, he was working, he has a methodology called Operation Wallacea, and he realized that in Plan Vivo projects, they had carbon projects or candidates that said, we want to get money, but they couldn't really be eligible for carbon. So he actually was the first who developed a biodiversity methodology to have another option. There might be ways that you can combine both, but this is the topic of bundling versus stacking, and it's those things that we still need to figure out how do these two work together.
Thank you so much. But maybe it's like I'm a bit maybe too pragmatic, but it's like a menu. Depending on the land, the nature, the ecosystem, and the demand. You can have a menu proposition. Not saying one is better than the other, so long as they all respect, the local community demand, and there's no abuse and which is
I would like to add, we can see something similar with water in how corporates are approaching water stewardship projects. And so they are doing typically nature-based solution projects, infiltration, different elements, but there's not a crediting scheme. They're applying methodologies. They are calculating. They are doing the narrative of the impacts they're having. They're even using some type of MRV. But the thing is, and the missing link is what happens when the corporation, their strategy shifts, and then the community, the people who were doing that project, they don't have any more incentives to keep doing those projects. So we see the crediting scheme as a vehicle. But coming back to what Mia was saying, we definitely see it as complementary, because nature dependencies or impacts are, although they have to be measured, but they're different as opposed to carbon. And then with the carbon, you can buy credits from a different region where you're creating the impacts or where you're emitting. And when it comes to biodiversity, what we've seen is that corporations are much interested in having it or doing it at a local level. So if you are buying the carbon credits from a project in Brazil, but your operations or your subsidiary is in Africa or wherever, you will just because you have a reputation to take care of in operations, and coming back to the risk, you want to mitigate your risks, and from the financial standpoint, that's where you want to do your project. So I don't know if we'll have enough time, but that is something that where financiers or in the banking must or they have an easier access or a lower hanging fruit is de-risking operations and de-risking, and that ties to money and to the investing or the investments that companies or corporates have in their value chains.
Sorry, I'm very conscious of time, and I knew 90 minutes would be too short, but we're getting there. So thank you so much. 5 more minutes. I think we answered all the quick questions. I'd like to make sure each of you have the opportunity in the last 5 minutes or 1.5 minutes each to communicate your ask to the audience. What do you need for to develop your business, your career? What you need from Climate Network, and what can you offer the network? So that's how we do it. So we kind of a peer-to-peer network where we all try to improve climate change on different remits, but we also need business and leads and stuff. So maybe I take you a bit off guard. I should have told you that before. So I'll start with Daniel because I know.
Well, I'll be really quick. So follow us on Instagram. On LinkedIn, on our website. Subscribe to our event. We have an event in Mexico City. Everyone's invited. October 6th and 7th. It will be a marketplace where transaction will happen. Not only talk, but also action. And we have projects. We have 20 certified projects throughout Mexico, Colombia, Portugal, Spain, and France, and other countries. We have a market that's ready to be activated. So my ask is to get in touch. We're on the ClimateNet app. Write to me, get in contact, and let's keep the conversation going. But above all, we need to drive money into local communities and landowners so they can still keep conserving and protecting, restoring biodiversity.
Thank you. Álvaro?
Well, I'm very shy on this, but I will seize the opportunity just to say that I'm near to publish a book doing a review of every existing biodiversity credit scheme and doing also a review of the crunch issues related to biodiversity, how they are different to carbon credits, what are the main issues to be solved to boost the biodiversity credit market. So you will know about this book. It will be free, released on the Creative Commons. So I will publish the link for you to download it. That's
Wonderful.
it.
We'll be delighted to promote it all over ClimateNet. When is it released? When is it published?
Maybe 1 or 2 weeks. I'm in the
wow, okay, good timing.
editions.
So excited. I had no idea. Mia? Very conscious of 1 minute each.
Yeah, so same here. If you need any support on either carbon, climate, biodiversity, sustainability, you can reach out from reporting, risk assessments, until if you want to buy biodiversity credit, definitely go to Daniel. And anything else we can definitely help. So many NERP countries, and the Middle East as well, and Asia.
Okay, well, we might reach out to you because actually at ClimateNet we're doing a research on co-creation exercise on some credit assurance. So we'd love to talk to you about that as well. Stefanie, last word.
This is unexpected.
Sorry, I should have asked. I forgot.
I've enjoyed in the nature-based solution space being a facilitator between science, communities, developers, and corporates. Recent and driving impact is really important to me. And recently I've taken the very scary step to become an independent consultant. I'm not sure if I like it yet, but I'd love to hear from people how I can help them, how I can drive my in which direction to go. I work in Spanish, German, and English, and have focused a lot on Latin America and tropical forests. And if any of you is at New York Climate Week, please meet me. It's my first time going for the Art of Forest Network. Have a look at this as well. It's a beautiful community for a practitioner, smallholders, and anyone working together to solve the problems that Daniel was mentioning. Thank you.
So how is it? What is it? Out of the forest?
The Art of Forests.
Art of Forest. Yeah, put it in the chat here. We have a few more seconds. Wonderful.
I'll speak to Daniel about this. I think it will be useful for you.
Well, Stefanie, we have more than 25 projects featured on the app, and some of them on the website. So if reach out to them through the app, I'm sure they would need some of your help. So so thank you very much, everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you find it really a valuable experience of your time and value of your time. And we'll keep connected with you. It'll be recorded. It'll be on the app in a week's time. And I will definitely promote it as well. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. It was great to have all of you on board. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much.
Thank you.